They had every advantage money could buy: private wings, padded mahogany panels disguising medical gear, specialists flown in like generals summoned to a battlefield. Yet the machines still kept beeping in that dim suite on the top floor. And a man who once outranked headlines was slipping away, minute by merciless minute. They called him a tech titan. He was known in magazines, in boardrooms, as someone who could bend code and markets to his will. His suite had more in common with a 5-star hotel than a hospital room. Ambient lamps, personal artworks, a smell of imported cologne that never quite hid the clinical tang of disinfectant. It was privacy bought with millions. It was, as it turned out, exactly where someone could hide a very old kind of danger. Maya, they called her Angela in passing. But in this telling she'd answer to Maya, moved through that suite the way shadows move in a familiar room, unnoticed, necessary, present but not observed. She was 38, practical in her movements, precise because habit had taught her efficiency. Her hands wiped away fingerprints from polished wood. Her cart of supplies squeaked like a metronome down the corridor. She did jobs invisible people do, quiet labor that keeps other lives running. But invisibility had never meant blankness. 15 years before, Maya had been on a different path. A scholarship student with a chemistry notebook, full of neat diagrams and the kind of questions that become research. Life rearranged those plans, a family tragedy. The youngest mouths to feed, and she left university early. She never forgot the reactions and patterns she'd learned. She read journals in stolen lunch hours and kept a battered textbook at home. Proof she had once belonged to another world. On a routine night she entered the suite and the air hit her. Antiseptic. A trace of expensive cologne. And something else. A metallic whisper that tugged at a memory of lectures and late-night lab work. Her eyes, trained by years of lab courses and a habit of noticing small inconsistencies, slid across the scene, a faint yellowing at the base of the nails. Hair thinning in a distinctive patchwork pattern. A patient list that read like a jigsaw of systems failing all at once. Nerves, digestion, cognition. Machines said one thing. The body told another story. Doctors moved through the room like a choreographed team. Calm voices masking urgency. The head physician had a reputation that made his name shorthand for competence. He commanded attention without raising his voice. He announced theories aloud and, more quietly, dismissed anything that did not fit those frameworks. Maya listened. She had learned to follow words without being seen. Her hands kept working, but her mind mapped things in a different register: pattern, cause, mechanism. She read the charts as if they were a chemical equation. Ambiguity sharpened into suspicion. Visitors came, polite, well-cut men who announced themselves in glossy magazines and business profiles. One in particular began to appear regularly. A well-spoken man with the ease of someone for whom doors open. He brought gifts, neatly wrapped, labeled, explained away as comforts. Each time he left, the room seemed to darken a fraction more. Maya noticed that small things moved. A jar on the nightstand shifted from one place to another. An item that had been tucked away now left where it would be used. To anyone else it was idle detail. To her it was an instruction, an invitation to touch. When the first crisis came, it arrived with the raw panic of alarms and running shoes on tile. Monitors flared. Nurses darted. Doctors snapped into roles that had been rehearsed for emergencies. Yet despite everything, despite the best minds and the newest equipment, the patient's condition worsened. Enzymes climbed. Kidneys faltered. Speech grew muddled. Tests were ordered and repeated. The answers refused to show. Maya paused in the doorway and watched. The clinical language sounded like a foreign film to the man whose face was turning paler by the minute. The team proposed autoimmune cascades, rare metabolic errors, and the possibility the body had simply begun to unmake itself. Each theory was plausible in isolation. Together they felt like a map without a destination. At her core a quiet certainty began to form. The symptoms, taken together, the peripheral numbness that traced upward like a tide, the stomach that refused to settle, the peculiar hair loss that came out in clumps, fit a pattern she had once studied. It was rare now, the sort of thing in textbooks and Cold War anecdotes. A heavy metal poisoning that impersonated a dozen other illnesses. It behaved like a ghost, leaving signs only if you knew precisely what to look for. She suggested it once, haltingly, to a nurse she trusted. The response was the practiced, gentle dismissal that invisible people receive from busy hospitals. "We appreciate your concern, but leave the medical work to the doctors." When she tried again, slipping a handwritten note onto a clipboard, it was met with laughter in a closed meeting. "Our cleaning staff has diagnostic opinions now." That laugh landed like a stone. But the stone did not break her resolve. Maya did what invisible people who love someone's life do. She collected proof. She watched the ritual around the jar of hand cream. The man who brought it insisted on applying it with theatrical care. A perfunctory caress of the patient's skin. The placement of that jar, the way it would be left where hands might touch, felt deliberate. She could not run official tests. She could not demand a toxicology panel that would be taken seriously. So she did what had once been her skill. She improvised. Not a recipe, not a step-by-step plan, but a simple, private experiment informed by the logic of chemistry. The right reagents and an eye for color. The same way a painter knows a brushstroke by feel. She took a tiny, secret sample and tucked it away. At home, with a battered textbook, she watched the signs she had memorized come alive. The next morning she came with more than intuition. She came with notes and a timeline, with visitor logs and photographs, with a simple, makeshift test that she'd used as a demonstration of presence, rather than a laboratory diagnosis. She could not perform hospital-grade analysis, but she could point to a consistent chain, exposure, symptom worsening, a repeated opportunity for contact. She presented it with the same exactness she had once used at a lab bench. When she entered the room, the conference halted. 20 pairs of professional eyes turned to an unassuming woman in a uniform. She felt the weight of their doubt like a physical thing. "This is a medical meeting," the head doctor said at first, clipped and firm. Maya set the small stack of evidence on the table and spoke. She did not plead. She explained, in clear, measured phrases, how the clinical picture fit the rare poisoning she'd studied. Sensory loss that ascended, digestive collapse, the hair pattern, all consistent with chronic exposure. She pointed to the visitor record and the repeated presence of the hand cream at the exact times the patient's condition deepened. She explained why standard screens could miss a slow, cumulative exposure. She left out the specifics that would teach a villainy. She focused on the pattern that only a trained mind would see. Silence followed. Then, slowly, the doctors leaned over her papers. The head physician's professional armor showed a crack. The data suggested what her memory insisted. A younger doctor, one who had once softened a dismissal into advice, leaned forward and said simply, "If this is what she says, it explains a lot." An official test was ordered, this time not as an afterthought but as a targeted screen. The lab results, ones that carried the weight of authority, confirmed what Maya had suspected. The sample from the personal product contained traces of a heavy metal. The clinician's certainty shifted, like a ship finally finding a charted reef after gliding blind for hours. Confrontation followed and, with it, consequences. The visitor who'd been so solicitous of comfort found his ritual exposed. Security closed off a corridor. Legal teams were called. Whether it was premeditated malice or something darker and more complicated, jealousy, power, greed, became a matter for investigators and courtrooms. Those were stories beyond the suite. The immediate thing, the human thing, was that the treatment changed. When the cause was finally identified, clinicians moved with laser focus to remove exposure and support the body. The monitors that had been so hostile settled into lines that rose and fell with less terror. Machines still beeped, but the beeps were no longer harbingers of an unanswerable decline. Maya waited outside the room like a patient animal, unnoticed until a junior doctor, the same one who had once softened his reply, walked past and met her eyes. There was no applause, no dramatic ceremony. Medicine rarely wraps recognition in drama. But the doctor's nod, small and human, held more than words. It was acknowledgement that talent and training can live in an apron, pocket as well as a lab coat. She walked home that night through streets that had not changed, past the same windows, the same dim shops. Her children were asleep when she unlocked the door. On the kitchen table, her university textbook lay open like a small bright flag, proof of what she had carried all these years. She had risked her job, the precarious income her family depended on, the safety of a quiet life, to make someone listen. What changed after that is not the kind of thing fairy tales reward. It was messy, legal, bureaucratic. The rich headlines that once called the patient a titan now chronicled a scandal. Investigators pieced together motives and movements. The hospital changed some protocols. The head physician's humility came in private. Maya's life found a new angle: offers to consult, invitations to speak, an awkward TV appearance to which she almost did not go, but in the quiet moments she preferred. She still kept her cleaning cart, still stopped to tie a shoelace or tuck a pillow. She kept the sameness because it was honest work and because it had taught her how to see. For all its drama, the smallest truth remained. Sometimes the greatest. Expertise is the ability to notice what others presume too small to notice. In rooms full of machines and titles, it was an invisible woman with an old chemistry notebook who read the body's language and refused to be ignored. At the end of the day, the monitors ceased announcing imminent loss. A man who had been slipping back into himself began, painfully and slowly, to return. And somewhere between hospital corridors and a kitchen table, the invisible became visible, not for fanfare, but because a life was salvaged by someone who remembered how to look. If there is a lesson in this, it is not one about riches or rank. It is about attention, how the world misnames what matters, how training and curiosity can hide in unexpected places, and how courage sometimes means taking the small, lonely risk of saying the thing everyone else thinks is ridiculous, and being right. End. A few production notes if you want them turned into a voiceover. Keep the pacing steady in the first 2 minutes for suspense. Slow down during Maya's internal recollection to build empathy. And tighten the tempo for the conference reveal. If you want, I can convert this into Urdu Hinglish narration, add timestamps for scene cuts, or trim or lengthen it to match an exact runtime. Which would you like next?